You can see from where the car park is for the tram, all the way round, all the new houses, Tesco itself, all the way around to Aldi, all that area, there was only one thing on here, and that is that pit.
At Holgate School outside Nottingham, Mike Endy's Year 10 history class has just completed a local history unit on the impact of coal mining, part of the new GCSE history pilot.
20 years ago, and then it just disappeared as if overnight.
This 12-week unit emphasises coursework, and assessment is done holistically across 3 assessment tasks.
Is that a sufficient legacy to really record just how important the coal mining was for Hucknall? The assessments for the pilot are very different to our other SHP history. That's 25% coursework and 75% exam, whereas ours is more or less 75% coursework and 25% exam. So that's a huge difference. What we're going to do is we're going to go back to the matrix for the marking. We're going to look at that and make sure that what you're doing when you're looking at other people's work, you're actually considering how well did people do against those criteria, because that's what I had to do when I marked it. So before I give any of your coursework back, you need to refresh yourself with what these are actually saying. I just want to draw your attention to things on that criteria list, things that we can say for next time you definitely have to pay attention to. So, select, organise and deploy effectively. So in other words, what sources are you going to use? Good understanding of the significance of the issue. Did you show how coal mining was important in the past, but also how it carried through to say where there was a significance and a legacy today? Critical use of sources with well-substantiated conclusions. When you finished work, did you actually bring it all to a conclusion? Did you say what you thought on the basis of the evidence you'd looked at? Or did you the marking process was obviously new. This idea that you mark holistically, you take the whole lot, there's not bits of marks here, there and everywhere. The challenge was really to look at the 3 pieces of work and then be able to say from those 3 pieces of work that there was just one band and one mark. It's got to be marked holistically. In other words, rather than having a mark scheme for the first part, the second part and the third part, I have to look at the whole lot. And on the basis of the whole lot, that's how I decide a mark. So sometimes Beth Ann is level 4, sometimes she's level 5 in these areas. So overall, I feel she is mostly a level 5 or mostly a level 4. And that's how you've got to decide. What about in the bands? So once I've decided, Blake, that you are a level 5, what sort of things are we going to use to say, OK, you are a level 5, but are you at the top of level 5 or are you towards the bottom?
Spelling, good
Yeah,
English.
exactly. Spelling, punctuation, grammar, how you communicate. Hucknall kept coming up as a little H. There were spelling errors and various other things. And all the time, I'm afraid, that's having to say, right, OK, you're definitely in band 5, Blake, but you're going down band 5. So communication is one thing. The other sorts of things are quite straightforward. They're things like, how much depth did you go into? How much explanation did you really give? So what do you have to keep making sure you're doing all the time? Every paragraph, what do you need to go back to? The question. Yeah, well done, Alex. Yeah, you've got to go and say, am I still on this question or am I just wandering off? Although I'm going to try and get you to say how you should improve your work, I do want you to remember that lots of your work was good. As you are all nicely set in pairs, can you swap your work with each other and actually then pick up on a few themes? OK, carry on.
You didn't even use the Mutton testimony, did you? The Winter's one. William Winter? Huh?
I did.
You used the miners that came in really well because you put loads of quotes in it. So you didn't just rely on like the ones we had in lesson, you used like your own quotes. So I think like you trailed off sometimes. So, but most of most of it was like proper to the point and explained it really well. So.
Yeah, using that particular source would have been useful, but you know, you were selecting, so it was up to you to do which you wanted. What you did do, you used the census material really well, because you were sort of saying, well, before it was like this, and after, I know it was like that, and that was really well done. So it swings and roundabouts, and not everyone's going to use the same thing, otherwise I'd be cheating. Alec, tell me something about Blake's. What would you say he most needed to do?
Use the unwritten testimony by William Winters.
Right.
Because that could have probably got his grade up.
Yeah, so a selection issue, yeah.
And he definitely could have probably improved his spelling and grammar.
Right. Jordan, what did you notice about Beth Ann's that you thought, wow, that was really good?
Yeah, she explained the area very well. She was basically straight to the point as well.
Right. What do you think about Jordan's? Pick out something good about Jordan's, but then be critical.
But
right?
it is good. It's got quite a lot of good information in it.
What about the marking framework? Pick something specific from there that you think he should have done. Why did he only get band 3?
Because he didn't really explain some things.
Right, so he left some things unexplained. So if you're going to do the identification, if you're going to use those sources, you really do need to follow it through and make your own stamp on it and actually say what you think about it. The 19th century task was really one where we were asking the students to look at Hucknall from the early period, and it wasn't too difficult to do because they could see from a variety of sources that Hucknall wasn't in a very good state. There was lots of unemployment. Basically, the village was going nowhere very fast. We've got the 1832 trade directory, less than one page, does give you some idea that Hucknall was not in place. And then, by looking at some later materials, they could clearly see that something fairly dramatic had happened to Hucknall.
With rough, dirty and noisy persons intent on the barter and traffic and not in dispute.
Trade directory for 1895, stretching over several pages. Right, so this is your question 1, Alice. This is what I was sort of picking up on yours. Keeping the task's significance in mind, reaching conclusions. Right, now you, at this end, obviously at the end, you were really good at reaching conclusions. There was no doubt about your overall conclusion. Yeah. But I think there was a need to sort of draw things together halfway through. So you were going down here, you were talking about Hucknall before the coal mines appeared.
Concluded before, and then after.
And then you've got, as well as jobs, you just went through a list of jobs there were. After coal mining came, so you've just sort of, right, I've been talking about before the mines, and now I've dispensed with that, I don't want to bother with it anymore. I think they were inclined to just do the traditional history and say, well, this is what it was like before, this is what it was like after. I can interpret both of these and I can tell you what caused it, but then, oh, you want me to tell, and then I've got to bolt this thing on about the significance of what all this was. So that it was sort of a reminding game, really, which you shouldn't have to do, but obviously with GCSE students you do. We'll start off with Alex. So we're looking at the introduction of the National Coal Board. Have you ever heard of the National Coal Board?
Nope.
Right. So the second assessment task was based on the early 20th century, and the aim there was to look more at a national focus. And I wanted to use a different method of the students producing this, so we took a risk and went for PowerPoint, but without all the gizmos and fancy bits flying onto the screen.
No children like you would have worked underground?
I think they did come up with some fairly major themes and also find out some quite interesting material about the state of the coal industry at that stage. Hundreds of collieries are owned by the National Coal Board. Health and working conditions improved. Dissolved in 1994. Well, I would pick up something there. Right, so that's it. Tell me something about Alex's work.
The background relates to the topic.
Yeah, so that's a nice idea and it sort of gives a theme to it all. Anything else that's good, Jordan?
Pays attention to it.
Yeah, it's very snappy, yeah. Right, so now about the critical side. Laura?
Every single piece has only got like a tiny little bit of information, and that's not like really what the question was asking you to do.
No, there are certainly some themes where he should have done some more. Now I go back to that one, for example. The National Coal Board was dissolved in 1994. What would you have maybe added? Do you want to say about that, Alice?
No, about something else.
Go on then.
It didn't bring it locally.
Yeah, there's no local, Alex. So you haven't brought the national scene back to the local, and of course the National Corps were very active in Nottinghamshire area and even in Hucknall. And the other thing is, as I was saying with this one, what should you have done there? What do you think you should have done there, Ashley?
Say why it was dissolved.
But we do need to know why all the time, not just facts. And that's one of the things, if you go down the levels in the criteria, if you don't actually explain your own ideas and give interpretations, you're just using everything at what they call surface value. The third assessment task was really the 20th century, the last days of the mine, and then the impact that its closure and the big strike had on it.
But it wasn't a bad life.
No, bro.
Wasn't a bad life.
Between you strikes from Yorkshire.
How well do you think the government handled the strike?
The closure of the mines surprised you?
The real purpose behind this was to be able to use ex-miners and get some sort of greater feel for the community and bring them in and involve them and make it different to other history courses. What you've got here, you've got interpretation, you've got some quite good stuff from the miners, you've been very accurate in recording what they've said, but lots of this is at fairly surface level. They were very keen to quote. They would quote massive sections of what they said. But what the problem was, then they would assume that what those people had said was the answer in itself, when in fact they needed to go on further and actually interpret what they were saying. And some of the students got that, but some just assumed that what they said was the answer. In terms of differentiation, it was a good tool. And here, the legacy, you need to say, well, is that important to you? Do you think that's significant as far as you're concerned? Because if you'd have done that, then that would have gone up leaps and bounds to the mark range. So it's just you actually giving a bit of yourself and you saying, well, what you think. And that's unusual for you, isn't it? Because what I'm really saying is you need to give your opinion. And yet you're always giving me your opinion. So you shouldn't have any problem at all about putting some of your opinions in. So you're actually going against your own character in a way by not saying what you think. There's promise there, but you've got to do more with it.
How do we do it?
And one of the options we can do is in year 11 we could actually put you in for this again, if you don't mind working on it and changing it. So yeah, well that's all right then, we can do that. But we will have to be working on what we're doing in year 11, so it will have to be a lot of your own time. Yeah? Okay, just try and wrap things up then. Starting off, the idea was we're looking at this from the point of view of not what we've done really today, but how we're going to use what we've done here as a springboard to do things better in the next 3 modules and the exam.
If I was to do it again, I would come to conclusions at different points in it, not just at the end of the essay, because often I can go off track away from the question.
I needed to go into more detail with some of the things I put. So I need to go into more depth and explain my evidence more.
Well, I wrote my answer, but I didn't really give my full opinion. It was just a bit like, I put this in. I didn't really give my opinion, I just put it in facts. So if I were to do it again, I'd put in my own opinion.
When I do my next one, I'm going to make sure that every single piece of evidence that I put in, I evaluate it properly so that it's the right bit, because on one of the bits I think I put a quote but didn't put the right explanation to it. And then I'm going to go into more detail with my conclusion as well, so it goes back to the question.